Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it was one of the last talks, but my name is Nikita Khalid. I am a senior research manager at Scratch Foundation. I've been with the company for about 2 years now, and my role is in evaluating all of the data that Scratch has and managing multiple research studies. So a little bit about me. I actually just defended my dissertation and graduated from the CUNY Graduate Center. And what I'm going to be presenting on, is the dissertation work that I was doing over the last few years. So I'll walk you through the agenda. First, I'll just do an overview of growth of digital platform use and how we're focused on minimizing gaps in child well-being research. I'll show you the research questions from the study and explain some of the frameworks that I use to kind of center all the data. We used the RITEC 8, of course, framework, as well as self-determination theory. And then I'll show you a little bit about Scratch and what we found. So the study was about Scratch data and what kids are doing on Scratch. We were interested in engagement, and we were interested in how we can look at that engagement and its relationship to their well-being outcomes. And that is what the user profile generation analysis was meant to do. So let's start with growth in digital platform use. There's, of course, everyone here knows, been a widespread growth in the integration of digital tools into children's lives. It has transformed not only learning, but now has transformed, especially with the integration of artificial intelligence, creativity, and how we interact with one another and how we interact with machines. Existing research currently focuses on isolated benefits, so cognitive or social outcomes, but there isn't much cross-cultural variability research, and it's very understudied. So that was one of the goals of this study as well. So what we did was try to minimize some gaps in that research. There's a need to study how cultural norms influence children's interactions with one another, their behaviors, and how those interactions shape how they feel about their own agency and autonomy, how they feel about their own competencies, and how they socialize, especially how they socialize online. There's also a need to design platforms that can effectively support those holistic child development and well-being outcomes. These are just a few pictures for some of the Scratch events that we've done with children and them playing around on Scratch, as well as Scratch Junior, which is for younger kids. So why Scratch? I didn't know this about Scratch until I started working there. It is in every country in the world. We actually hit 1 billion projects created last year. There are, I don't even know how many data points. I couldn't even tell you. I think for the dissertation, if I multiplied all the different forms of data, it was amounting to over 3 million data points that I could have used for my dissertation. It's like insane how much data exists because of how many children use this. So it's a prime place, essentially, for us to conduct research on how kids interact with technology and how it's impacting their creativity. So here are the research questions. The first one was, how are autonomy, competence, creativity, and relationships, which are indicators of well-being, reflected on Scratch? What are typical Scratch user profiles, which were built using those 4 indicators? And how do these user profiles differ? Do they differ at all by age, by gender, by country of origin? Digital play benefits. I don't even need to do this slide because everyone here knows about the benefits of digital play, but essentially it connects us globally and provides us with virtual communities. Autonomy, creativity, and social skills are heavily enhanced through role play and through collaboration, which is moderated through digital play. Unstructured play also improves how children feel about their resilience. It helps to reduce stress for them, and it also enhances engagement. Digital play fosters creativity, it fosters problem solving, but there are obviously caveats to everything. Excessive screen time can also lead to isolation, it can lead to attention difficulties, so we have to monitor what kids are doing. And guidance helps purposeful digital play, and it can balance those risks and benefits to support developmental goals. So here's the RITEC 8 framework. We didn't use all 8 of these constructs. We used 4, which were the autonomy, competence, relatedness, or relationships, and creativity, because those were the 4 that were very much ingrained into what Scratch does and what kids do on Scratch. However, self-determination theory was a major theory in the dissertation work, and it also very nicely overlaps with the RITEC 8 constructs that I just mentioned. Self-determination theory is a psychological theory that includes 3 constructs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. which they call, but it's relationships or social behaviors. And those are essentially identical to the ones that are in the RITEC 8 framework. And research, empirical studies have shown that autonomy is linked with heightened well-being and life satisfaction, competence, shown that practice will build mastery and self-efficacy, increases confidence for people. Relationships, they reduce stress and they improve resilience if you have a community around you that supports you, that fosters your well-being. And creativity was a very important construct for us because Scratch is a creative coding platform. So when kids come on there, that is what they're meant to do, is be creative and tinker and imagine and see what they can create. And that's not just for coding, it's also used for things like digital art. Empirical research has also indicated that digital tools can increase opportunities for things like self-expression, which is something that we actually found in the study, and collaboration, which contributes to psychological well-being. So a little bit about Scratch. Scratch has hit over 1 billion projects this year. We also have 140 million users globally. This study specifically looked at 29 countries. Those were the countries that were both either part of the RITEC research and also our top new user counts for Scratch. So we sampled those specific 29 countries. I have a list of those as well. So we sampled at random 1,000 users per country out of the 29. So it was already a pretty big data set of 29,000. And then with removing for missing data and all of those sorts of things, we kind of got down to, I think it was about 17,315 users, which is still a pretty substantial sample. So we used that to generate these user profiles. So here are the 4 constructs. I will read some of these data points out loud if it's hard to see, but the 4 well-being indicators are on the left-hand side, and the Scratch data points that we sifted through that we thought were indicative of these 4 constructs are on the right-hand side. So you see things like for autonomy, whether or not, how many projects are in studios. So on Scratch, a studio is just a themed space that can be created by Scratchers where they add their own personal projects and have a little like community about that space. So for example, there's a huge studio that's widely popular on Scratch called Girls Who Don't Fit In. And a bunch of girls, as well as other people, are in that studio creating projects about their personal interests. So for autonomy, that was one of the data points. How many projects have they added to various studios? Are they hosting studios? Are they curating studios and helping manage them? Are they filling things in their About Me section? Are they telling us a story about themselves? Those were indicative of autonomy. For competence, for example, what are the number of blocks that are being used in their projects? Are they using different sprites? Are they uploading their own audio and images? Or are they using stock audio and images? For creativity, how many of them are remixing projects? So on Scratch, a remix is basically a copy of somebody else's project. And once you copy it, it is now a remixed project that credits the original author, but they can change it however they want. So rather than starting from the beginning, they kind of start where that person left off. And we look at how are they really changing it? Are they changing it substantially? What are the variety of different block types that they use? Motion, audio, visual blocks. What are they doing in the project itself? And then for relationships, are they sharing their work? Are they liking other people's work? Do they comment anything at all? And how many different studios are they following that are indicative of their diverse interests? So those were the data points that we looked at and used to construct the profiles. Here's just some demographics of the 17,000 sample that we had. Majority of Scratch users are, the average age for Scratch users is 12 years old, but our main audience is from ages 8 to 16. So here's just a histogram of the sample where they were at. So they were pretty much between 10 and 14, I'd say. And then for gender, majority of the sample here, as well as majority of users on Scratch, are boys. We also have about 32% girls, and then there were also a chunk that were indicating non-binary individuals, other, or they just preferred not to give us a gender. And then for countries, these were all the 29 countries that we used. I won't read them all out, but the sample was very close in the frequency of how many users were in each. We kind of tried to keep it pretty similar so that not one country was kind of overweighing the sample in a certain way. Now I'll do a little bit about the personas. So we had 3 personas that were found. I ran what's called a negative binomial grade of membership factorization, very fancy language. It was just giving me profiles from the data. There were 3. So we had coding creators. Those people were focused on building complex original projects with more sophisticated code, and they incorporated multimedia elements. Then we had social creators. Those people were more community-based, so they had a lot more commenting behavior. They shared their projects, they curated studios, and they remixed others' projects. And then we had also a group that were indicative of remix creators. So these people blended creativity through remixing, but also engaged in studios, so they're collaborating with others, and skill building, so they primarily remixed others' work, but also contributed some original ideas as well. And here's just a visual, even though it's very small, of the frequencies of each of the behaviors. So all 3 graphs are the same variables on the x-axis. It's just the frequencies of what behaviors each of those types of users are engaging in. So the red would have been coding creators with the same behaviors that I just described. Green would have been social creators, and then blue is the remix creators. So they vary. That's the purpose of the graphic, just to show that they're engaging in different behaviors. And here's just the sample sizes of each. So majority were actually remix heavy content creators. The second largest group were the code heavy creators. And the smallest group, surprisingly, was social creators. So now, based on those findings, we were like, why did that happen? Why are people not socializing as much? Who's not socializing as much? Who's creating more complex and using multimedia elements? And which kids are doing remixes more and engaging in studios, and why is that? So those were all the questions that kind of came up from these preliminary findings. Then I did what was called, another fancy term, multinomial logistic regression. That was to kind of see, okay, these are the 3 profiles. Now let's look at different ages, different genders, and different countries and see where they're fluctuating and if it's significant or not. So when I ran this analysis by age, I found that age does significantly impact profile membership, and the odds of being a social creator or engaging in more social behaviors increase with age, and they peak around age 12. And that kind of makes sense because majority of Scratch users are ages 10 to 14 or 8 to 16. So if the majority of Scratch users and the average Scratch user is 12 years old, those are the people that are going to be talking to each other, so which is why a lot of them are peaking at 12 for social creation behaviors. Then I also took a look at what the odds of being assigned to remix creators were, and you can see the blue is decreasing as they get older, but the red, which is the coding heavy creators, are increasing as they get older. So that's indicative to me that as the younger kids need more scaffolding, because the remix is already a copy of a finalized project. So they already have that structure, they have the blocks in there, they have some descriptions from the previous person. So the younger kids are more likely to remix because it's more help for them. And as they gain that competency, that behavior decreases, just how with the red section of the chart, coding heavy multimedia elements and more complex projects are being created by older children. Then we also did the same thing, but for gender. Gender also significantly impacted profile membership, particularly for social creators. So girls were actually the least likely to engage in social behaviors on the platform of any of the other genders. Boys were at a 10% higher odds, but then that even increased so much more for non-binary. Non-binary, which was one of the smallest parts of our sample, was actually 160% higher odds of socializing. And for those who decided not to disclose their gender, those were at a 78% higher odds. So we found here that girls socialize less. Why is that, and what can we do to kind of bolster that behavior, which is where the design implications come from the work. And we also found from these findings that because non-binary individuals and those who prefer not to disclose a gender are communicating with one another more, perhaps that means that Scratch is a area and space for safe and collaborative self-expression for them. Here's a country and profile membership chart. So these are all the 29 countries that were in the sample, and I ran that multinomial logistic regression here just to see whether or not different countries had different profile membership. I think one of the most interesting findings here was that Japan had the biggest chunk of social creators, and their commenting trends were like through the roof compared to all of these other countries in the sample. Then we also found that countries like Australia, Canada, Pakistan, Russia, the United States, as well as the United Kingdom, were all very closely aligned with social creation, but not as much as Japan was. And then for remix heavy creator alignment, three countries stood out here: Bulgaria, the UK, and the US were heavier on the remix creator side. And then for coding creators, the Czech Republic, Italy, Poland, and Spain were the countries that stood out here, and Taiwan, that leaned toward more code-heavy creation. And that could also be due to more national emphasis on coding platforms and integration into curricula as well. Okay, so implications for design. These are some implications based on what we found. Fewer social creators. So what does that mean for Scratch? There's a need for more accessible collaborative tools. We also did interviews, semi-structured interviews that were not part of this study. And a lot of the time when we spoke with kids about their experience, they always said, you guys don't have a Google Doc type of version of Scratch. I want to work with my friends, but I can't because it's only my account and my project. So we need more accessible collaborative tools. We also found that there's a need for more visible, inclusive community spaces. If they're not socializing with one another, maybe it's because they haven't found each other yet. So what do we do to get kids with similar interests into these niche communities so that they can be motivated by one another to create and socialize more? We found that studio spaces are not as heavily used as the other features. So they'll comment and they'll remix and they'll share, but not everyone is finding studios with themed interests that they like. Why is that? What can we do to help them find those niche communities and those themes that are going to get them talking and going to get them playing and tinkering and making all these different kinds of projects? We found that there were fewer girls on the platform. So what does that mean? That means that they can benefit from more mentorship opportunities, perhaps. Maybe if they find, or we were able to pair children, specifically girls, with mentors or scratchers that have been in the community for longer, maybe that will help them to engage in different creative behaviors together. And then we also found things like higher rates of sharing and socialization for non-binary and gender non-disclosures, which is indicative perhaps that it supports freedom of expression. There's high customizability, there's high personalization because you're building from scratch, and community building for diverse gender youth. And as well, we have high engagement in countries such as Japan, the US, UK, Pakistan, etc. And that's just indicative of national policies that focus on STEM curricula, and there's a need for digital skills in those countries. Well, there's a need for digital skills globally, but perhaps those countries are pushing those things forward a little bit more than others. And lastly, younger users are using remixing more and transition to coding heavy as they get older, which is indicative of how important it is to scaffold for kids that have just started and that are beginners so that they can transition to more difficult or more complex coding in the future. And I'll just leave it off with this. Digital learning platforms are for more than just academic competencies. They're contributing to lifelong learning journeys for these kids. Scratch is allowing children to explore their interests, find the communities that are important to them, and create what they imagine across any age and any culture. Thank you, guys.
Talking to me. Thank you, great job, and congratulations on completing your dissertation. That's a big one. So my question is, how are most of these children introduced to Scratch? Is it in school, or do you know the numbers for that? And if so, my question relates to the male versus female participants. Is it a unique identifier? Are you measuring email address, or do they have a number? And are there duplicates in there? Are the kids signing up for Scratch at school and then going home, and more boys will sign up for another account than another? Do you follow my drift there? I know that's a multi-level question. Thank you.
Let me answer the second one because it's in my brain now, and then you'll have to repeat the first question again because I'm thinking about the second one. Oh no, actually, I remember the first question. It was about school numbers. So for this data, I didn't have a demographic indicator of whether or not they were school versus personal home accounts, but recently, actually a couple weeks ago, they've given me that information. So the next iteration of this persona analysis, I'm including those user types into it to see if I can cut it how I did with age, gender, and country by origin of the account. So if they're creating more in school versus if they're creating more at home, they're going to be making different stuff. Because if they're doing it in school, their teacher is introducing it to them, and they're probably saying, I want you to make this type of thing. So it's kind of narrowing their creativity and narrowing their lens of thinking. But if they're at home and they're excited and they just want to play with it, they might not really care about doing good. They're just caring about having fun. So that will definitely change the way that they're interacting with the program, but I'm not sure of the exact numbers. And then for girls and boys, I know that boys are definitely a larger group on Scratch than girls, but the duplicate emails is a good point. And that could also have to do with the school versus home accounts because there's definitely duplicates. And I also know that teachers can create an account and have all of their students use, I'm pretty sure, their account. So it gets like messy because they're using, some of them use parent emails, some of them don't use parent emails. So we're not using identifiers like email to track boy versus girl. I think they are just self-reported demographics, and country of origin is also self-reported by the, so there's no like tie to their username. So we don't know the user that the data is coming from.
Questions? Yeah.
Thanks. Do you have any information or about the complexity or like of what the students are or like the kids are building in terms of like if it's something simple or something complex, and if that plays a role into the analysis at all?
I didn't use design patterns for projects in this, but I am working on something now that they have pulled what's called a JSON file. So it's a point in time, multiple times of one iteration of a project. So what I'm trying to do now is take multiple of those files of the same project and look at what they're doing over time and what blocks are being used and what patterns are being used to see if they're actually learning something. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to. And I'm actually having a hard time because I need to think of a creativity framework that I'm going to feed into an AI so that it can help me gauge the changes and connect them to aspects of creativity. And I haven't created one yet, so I'm gonna need help with that.
Question and kind of a follow-up from that as well. Actually, first a comment. The breakdown of boys and girls and gender not disclosed to give Scratch grace, a lot of those could just be girls. Because as someone who spends a lot of time playing games and someone who grew up in the 90s when we were told to not disclose our gender online, I never ticked the female box. So the implication was maybe girls need more mentoring, and I'm always here for that. But if there's a way to maybe follow that up with qualitative research about whether girls are not disclosing their gender, maybe that could be cleared up as well. The question, which is kind of related to his, is I would be really interested in a pattern type or a genre type of what these kids are creating. Because I work at Roblox, and you can see clear pattern types that kids are gravitating towards. And I wonder if there's any way that we can extrapolate that data.
We did some qualitative research where we pulled project titles, instructions, notes, and credit information and did like a simple thematic coding analysis on a subsample of users to see what they're actually making. So rather than looking into the project, which is a little more complicated, we looked at just how they're titling and describing the projects. So we did that analysis as well, and we found that the majority were creating games, They're also creating art. They make educational focus, which probably comes from that school comment. There is a theme that arises that it's more an educational focus, like math or science type of project. And then there were also themes like personalization. So those are more like people changing avatars or sprites, and colors and images and things of that nature to personalize for themselves. So there were other categories as well. I just can't think of all of them right now.
And we have one last question.
So, what kind of code does Scratch use, and what kind of programs are you able to make with that code?
That was a question actually that a kid asked me, and I had to ask the engineering people because I didn't know the answer to that question. Scratch is based on blocks, so kids only see the visual drag and drop blocks. There'll be different blocks that have different actions, and when they stack them and click them together and press play or the green flag, the sprite that they are trying to make do, the sprite is the character, so it'll start with the Scratch cat, and then the blocks that get put together, once they put them in the order that they want, it will make that animation do whatever it is that they want to do. So when they make them more complex to actually make like a video game, there are multiple sprites, multiple block codes, but I don't know of the actual language that is behind in the back end behind Scratch. Like the kids aren't typing anything into a syntax or anything like that. They're just dragging and dropping blocks based on color and based on what the block is intended to do, like motion, speech, things like that.
It doesn't do like how in Minecraft coding you can change it to Python or to JavaScript. It doesn't do that. Like it's the one you would use just for block based. Yeah, and it's also why some students there's that limitation to as they get through all of that and they get older, they are looking for something that extends beyond that. But
Yeah, absolutely. We did interviews, semi-structured interviews with kids, and they said that after Scratch, all of them indicated Python was the next thing that they went to.
Thank you so much. This was really informative. Thank all of you.